Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakuya. The title of today's talk is Garden Mulch and Buddhist Training. Before we get into that, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. I've been doing a lot of maintenance and repair projects lately here on the homestead. The garden is just about finished, but that doesn't mean the work is over. There's a lot of woodworking that needs to be done, building furniture like benches and chairs. There's a lot of repairs that need to be done, a lot of fences, animal enclosures, etc. And there's also maintenance in the garden itself, like repairing garden beds. One of the projects I've been doing is laying down garden mulch. So the really great thing about garden beds is that they make it easier to pull weeds. They also make it a little bit easier to harvest because the vegetables are about a foot off the ground, so you don't have to bend over quite so much. The bad thing about using garden beds the way we do is that grass and weeds still grow around the beds, even though they're not inside of them. And it can be hard to pull the weeds by hand or get in there with the mower. So the solution to this is to lay down garden mulch. And mulch is just wood chips that you put down over the grass and the weeds to stop them from growing up. However, in order to make this work effectively, you can't just put the mulch down. You have to put down what's called a weed cover cloth first, which is made out of fabric or plastic that acts as a barrier between the unwanted plants and the mulch, stops them from growing up. And then you lay the mulch down and it looks very pretty and professional and you're ready for Instagram. But there's a problem. As I discovered towards the middle of this year, the garden mulch, the wood chips, decompose over time. They become soil. And what grows in the soil? Grass and weeds. So all that back-breaking labor I put in last year was slowly and surely starting to be nullified as the wood chips turned into soil and things started to grow in that soil around the garden bed. So, me being the city slicker that I am, I went to the hardware store, I talked to some of the old timers and asked them what to do about it. And they laughed at me a little bit and said, put more mulch down. So that's what I've been doing, remulching the garden, covering up the weeds that have grown up, replacing the weed cover cloth where it's needed to ensure that the garden is free of weeds, free of unwanted plants, and the vegetables have lots of room to grow. But as I was doing this work, something interesting occurred to me. I realized that it was all for naught. Because by this time next year, once again, the wood mulch will turn into soil, grass and weeds will start to grow in that soil, and I will have to remulch again. As long as I am physically able, as long as I want to care for this homestead and cultivate my garden, I will have to mulch it every single year. And this made me think about the other work here that I will have to do essentially for the rest of my life. Every day, no matter how little or how much sleep I got the night before, I'll have to wake up early, feed and water the animals. Every 2 weeks or so, I'm going to have to pull out the tractor and cut the grass. Not because I've done something wrong or the world is out to get me, but that's just the simple nature of reality. Grass grows, we have to cut it. Animals are hungry, we have to feed them. Weeds grow, and we have to put mulch over them. This is a lifelong practice. Now, I could be heartbroken and frustrated by this, weighed down by the fact that I'll never be done, or I can enjoy the fact that I have a physical body that allows me to do this work. I can be grateful that I have access to the resources that allow me to care for the garden and the animals and the lawn in such a way that it's beneficial both for them and for me and for my neighbors as well, ending suffering for all sentient beings. Praise Buddha. Now, this is true of gardening and homesteading, but it's also true of Buddhist training. We as Westerners, it's very dangerous for us to get tied up in thoughts like enlightenment or nirvana, because we can get the false impression that if we do the practice well enough, eventually we'll be done. We will meditate well enough that we'll never be angry. We will chant so beautifully that we'll never be sad. We'll have so much loving kindness towards our neighbors that they'll never be cross with us. But that's just not the nature of reality. In the same way I mulch this year with the understanding I'll have to mulch next year, we sit on the cushion today with the understanding that we're preparing to sit on the cushion tomorrow. We chant the sutras today, Namu Amida Butsu, with the understanding that 50 years from now, if we're still alive, we'll still be chanting. And it's important that we remind ourselves of this, because if we have the false notion that weeds shouldn't be growing in our mind, then we might think that our practice is failing. I felt angry today. I'm not meditating well enough. I was cross with my neighbor today. I'm not chanting correctly. I made a mistake during the bows. I'm a failure as a Buddhist. Nothing could be further from the truth. The nature of a garden is that it grows weeds. The nature of the mind is that it grows greed, anger, and ignorance. This is the nature of reality. What's important is that we're willing to put in the work every day to cover over those weeds, those three poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance in our mind garden, in the same way that we pull and cover over weeds in the physical garden. And as long as we do that work, vegetables will grow in the physical garden, and wisdom and compassion will grow in our mind. As long as we set the expectation correctly, that as long as we're doing the practice, we're doing it correctly. Amitabha.